In June 1944, the US invasion of Biak Island was supposed to be a quick strike, another step in MacArthur's relentless march toward the Philippines. Instead, American forces found themselves locked in a brutal, unexpected fight against a Japanese defense unlike anything they had faced before. Hidden deep within coral caves and fortified tunnels, Japanese troops refused to play by the old rules of island warfare. What was meant to be a swift victory turned into a drawn-out nightmare of ambushes, counterattacks, and relentless resistance. Welcome to Biak, where the jungle concealed death and the caves swallowed men whole. Here is the official U.S. Army account of the battle.
Exploiting the successes of the Hollandia operations, task forces were organized by the Sixth Army to seize Wakdi Island, Sarmi on the mainland of Dutch New Guinea, and Biak Island. The Wakdi and Sarmi landings were made with scheduled success. On the 27th of May 1944, landings were made at Bosnek, Biak Island, by the Hurricane Task Force. A form of warfare was encountered that required experimentation, trial and error, and all of our available weapons before the mission could be accomplished. Many lessons may be learned from this operation that may lessen casualties in future operations, in which the terrain offers similar strong defensive positions to the Japanese. In that event, this history should prove of value. Biak is located in the Schouten Island group, north of Gilvink Bay and approximately 1 degree south of the equator. The island is shaped like a foot, with the heel to the south and the toe pointing to the east. Terrain studies have described the upper third of Biak as mountainous, and the remaining 2/3 as essentially flat. The ground action of the Biak campaign occurred on the essentially flat portion. The southern and eastern areas, while flat in part, are broken by steep elevated coral and limestone terraces, which rise with step-like precision to an inland plateau. Within the terraces and cliffs are countless caves, many of which are connected and interconnected by fissures and tunnels. Stalactites and stalagmites add to the near impregnability of the caves as defensive positions. Biak appears to be principally of coral rock, thrust up by volcanic action in successive stages. The caves approximate levels which probably mark pauses in the upthrusts during which the rock, then at sea level, was dissipated by water action and later raised. Sump caves are the largest and are incident to faults which appear to have existed while the caves, now 200 or more feet above sea level, were at sea level. Vegetation on the terraces is primarily rainforest. Further inland, scrub and secondary growth predominate. The south-central and eastern areas of Biak are without surface streams, as the terrain is inclined to subterranean streams and pools. Springs and water points are rare, and their possession was of high importance throughout the operation. The Japanese defense of Biak was based on brilliant appreciation and use of the terrain. His defeat was accomplished by the canalization of a considerable portion of the Japanese force by a relatively small number of our troops, while the remainder of our forces crushed his main defenses. This was possible because of the most unusual terrain conditions which will be discussed throughout this history. On the 14th of June 1944, Lieutenant General Walter Kruger, commanding general of the Sixth Army and of the Alamo Task Force, called General Nickelberger for a conference at 6 p.m. The latter was at once informed that he would proceed without delay to Biak with the entire headquarters and assume command of the Hurricane Task Force. It was explained that after continuous heavy fighting coupled with extremely unfriendly terrain, intense heat and scarcity of water, the infantry units within the task force were beginning to tire to a critical degree. It was further explained that the rather confused picture of the fighting at Biak indicated that the success of future operations was threatened. Major General Horace H. Fuller was informed that upon relief from command of the task force, he would retain command of the 41st Division. General Eichelberger was also informed that the 34th Infantry was under orders to proceed to Biak to reinforce the Hurricane Task Force. It was decided to move Headquarters and Headquarters Company and Headquarters Artillery Battery to Biak in 2 echelons. The advance party was to go by air. The remaining personnel was to follow by water transportation. At 8:30 a.m., the 15th of June, the advanced echelon of the I Corps headquarters departed from Lake Sentani for Biak by Catalina flying boats. The planes landed on open sea at the destination, and at 12:30 p.m. reached the shore. Upon landing, General Eichelberger immediately assumed command of the Hurricane Task Force. He spent the afternoon at the front, observing the forward positions and discussing the situation with Major General Fuller. On this same date, the remaining officers and enlisted men of the Corps headquarters, except those still in the rear echelon at Goodenough Island, the headquarters and headquarters artillery battery, and the 34th Infantry Regiment boarded LSTs. The LSTs sailed the following day for Biak, escorted by destroyers. After landing at Bosnek, the 162nd Infantry had attempted to seize Mokhmerdrome by a drive along the coast. The regiment extended its lines without obtaining control of the dominating ridges above the coast. As a result, its flank was attacked by the Japanese at the Narrows, a point vicinity Mokhmer village, at which the high coastal ridge extended almost to the sea. While the advanced elements of the 162nd Infantry were withdrawn by water and by overland movement, the task force commander countered this situation by ordering the 186th Infantry to move to the north of Bosnek, then west, and secure Mokhmerdrome from the north and northeast. The 186th had originally moved along the coast to the east after landing at Bosnek. Therefore, their move to the Drome necessitated a long march over very difficult terrain. Heavy fighting was continuous. Water was critical. Many men were close to the point of exhaustion. The 186th had captured a water hole in the hills north of Bosnek, but was forced to withdraw before the water point could be organized, due to the emergency which developed as the Japanese cut into the lines of the 162nd. After seizure of Mokhmerdrome, the 186th relaxed but slightly. Although they had pushed through the high ground north of the Drome, they failed to secure it after the Drome was captured. Japanese moved again to these ridges and were in a position to fire on the Drome area and on the 186th. Mokhmerdrome had been repaired and surfaced to 4,000 feet, but Japanese fire from the ridges denied the use of the Drome. The 186th pivoted to face the Japanese positions in a northeasterly direction. Several frontal attacks had been attempted, but with little success. The 162nd Infantry, after reorganization following its engagement in the Narrows, moved up to the trail leading northwest of Mokhmerdrome and reached the sump holes. The 1st Battalion encountered the strong enemy positions there. The 2nd and 3rd Battalions faced north and west at the right side of the sump hole, their lines forming a V. This regiment had also attempted frontal attacks on the enemy in that area without success. The 163rd Infantry landed at Bosnek on the 27th of May 1944, after having been withdrawn from the completed Wakde operation. This regiment continued the mission that the 186th had begun, the elimination of enemy in the ridges east of Bosnek. This unit, less the 3rd Battalion, was placed under task force control, and their mission was enlarged to include the ridges west of Bosnek as far as Parai town. Their operations consisted of patrolling and mopping up areas bordering the coastal track and securing the water point north of Bosnek that the 186th had captured prior to its move to the Mokhmerdrome area. For 3 days, the battalion had moved overland to the northeast of the enemy main defenses and had succeeded in establishing a squad on the crest of Hill 320. This battalion remained under control of the 41st Division. Hill 320 was the dominating terrain feature within the entire zone of action north of the Dromes and afforded excellent observation. The unexpected move by this 3rd Battalion patrol evidently took the Japanese by surprise. After complete investigation of the situation, which included 2 days of observing the battle situation in the forward areas, one of the commanding general's first orders required a reinforced company to man the observation post on Hill 320. By the end of that day, a plan for attack on the 19th of June was formulated. The enemy situation had been none too clear throughout the operation. The existing maps were partially inaccurate and, of course, could only give indications of the detailed ground conformation. A few vertical aerial photographs were available, but these failed to show the terrain features dictating the enemy defense, the networks of caves. From personal observations, intensive study of captured documents and such information as could be obtained from the limited number of prisoners, the commanding general reached the conclusion that one Japanese infantry battalion defended the sump holes area and the high ground to the north, and that a smaller force defended the high ridges northwest of Mokhmerdrome. Enemy positions in the remainder of the southeastern part of the island were believed to be a battalion. This estimate was correct as far as the high ground north of the Dromes was concerned. Enemy dispositions at other locations on the island were positively determined at a later date. The plan of attack required a reorganization within all units and movements to assembly areas in preparation for coordinated attack. The field order, issued late in the night of the 17th of June, ordered a limited objective attack on the 19th of June. The mission was to envelop the enemy right, south flank, seize the high ground north of Mokhmar-Drome, and required that the ridgeline 1,000 yards east of Boroko-Drome be occupied. This last requirement was in preparation for a subsequent attack on Boroko and Cerrito-Dromes. The plan for attack necessitated that a small force canalize the Japanese strength in the ridges east of Mokhmar village. The 163rd Infantry, less 3rd Battalion, was directed to increase the tempo of their patrol activity and to locate and engage the enemy forces within their area. It was evident from the number of caves, holes, and precipices the Japanese were free to choose the location of their positions at will. His main strength could be shifted to counter any localized attack that our forces might make. It was necessary that any shift of enemy strength be prevented prior to attack of the 19th of June. The remaining battalion of the 163rd Infantry, the 3rd Battalion, was ordered to move northwest and occupy a position on the high ground to the north of the Japanese positions. The 162nd Infantry, still in the neighborhood of the Sump Hole, was to remain in the positions they held at that time. In the coordinated attack, the 162nd was ordered to continue its frontal attacks. The 186th Infantry was to attack to the north and to the east from its assembly positions on the ridge above Mokhmar-Drome. If successful, the enemy would be enveloped, with the 186th Infantry on the high ground north and west of the Japanese positions, the 2nd and 3rd Battalions of the 162nd Infantry in the low ground to the south in defensive positions, and the 3rd Battalion of the 163rd Infantry on the high ground to the north and to the west of the enemy. On the 18th of June 1944, the remainder of the headquarters, the 34th Infantry, and the headquarters and headquarters artillery battery, and the 167th Field Artillery Battalion, which had joined the convoy at Wakde, arrived at Biak. General Fuller, who at his own request had been relieved of command of the 41st Division by commanding General Alamo Force, left the area around 11 a.m. Brigadier General Doe was temporarily placed in command of the division. General Doe moved his headquarters that day to his advanced command post, which was south of Mokhmar-Drome. The command, taking over its duties as headquarters of Hurricane Task Force, established a command post on the beach near the village of Mandan. The 34th Infantry was attached to the 41st Division. Except for small labor detachments and vehicles, the regiment was moved from Bosnek to Parai in LCTs. During the remainder of that day and the 19th of June, the regiment assembled at the west end of Mokhmar-Drome. It was made definite in the field order of the 17th of June that the 34th Infantry would not be committed in the attack of the 19th of June without authorization of the task force commander. Plans were in process to use this regiment in a drive west to Cerrito village and in the securement of Boroko and Cerrito-Dromes. On the 19th of June 1944, the coordinated attack of the 41st Division was launched as planned. The attack met with complete success and overran Japanese resistance to the north of the Sumps. The attack was witnessed by General Eichelberger, who on returning to his command post radioed General Kruger that at 4 p.m. the situation was incomparably better. Included in the radio was his statement that Mokhmar-Drome was now secure from hostile ground attack. During the attack, the 2 Days Battalion, 186th Infantry, advanced northeast to a ridge position. The 3rd Battalion, 186th Infantry supporting the attack, advanced north on the trail. The 1st Battalion, 186th Infantry, attacking from the west, pushed into a point approaching the nose. The 162nd Infantry executed a holding mission during the attack. The 1st Battalion engaged with the enemy at the eastern end of the Sumps. It was beginning to be apparent that the Sumps were the key position in the Japanese defense north of the Drome. The 2nd and 3rd Battalions of the 162nd Infantry reorganized and improved their position. However, the relative location of their front lines was unchanged. With the successful accomplishment of the limited objective mission, Field Order No. 3 was issued. This order required that the enemy be destroyed in the Sump area and that Cerrito village be seized and secured. The 41st Division with 34th Infantry, 601st Tank Company, 121st Field Artillery Battalion, 947th Field Artillery Battalion, and 3rd Battalion, 163rd Infantry attached, was directed to continue its principal mission of destroying the enemy forces in the area around the Sumps, the previously mentioned nose, and in the teardrop area. It was specified that one RCT seize and secure Borico and Cerrito dromes, and secure Cerrito village. This RCT was further ordered to occupy the high ground overlooking Mokmer, Borico, and Cerrito dromes. The 163rd Infantry, less the 3rd Battalion, with the 146th Field Artillery Battalion and 41st Recon Troop attached, remained in Task Force Reserve. The Task Force Reserve was ordered to continue their assigned mission of vigorous patrolling in the ridges and cliffs north of Bosnek and extending to the eastern end of the island. The attack was launched at 6:30 a.m. local time on the 20th of June and was successful. Borico Drome was occupied at 10:27 a.m. local time by the 1st Battalion, 34th Infantry, and Companies A and C advanced to the east edge of the ridge above the Drome. Cerrito Drome was occupied by the 2nd Battalion, 34th Infantry at 9:30 a.m. local time, and Companies F and G moved onto the ridge north of Borico Drome with little resistance. The 3rd Battalion pushed on to Cerrito village meeting light resistance. Company I established a roadblock on the trail north of Cerrito village. Company K patrolled west toward Insiram. The 162nd Infantry continued their operations in the Sump Hole area. Late in the afternoon of June 20th, the attacking units withdrew to their battalion perimeter after being entirely unsuccessful in their efforts to reduce the sump caves. Japanese snipers had been unusually active from their well-concealed positions in crevices and recesses in the ridges around the sumps. During the night, the Japanese came out of their cave positions and made a series of harassing attacks. Mountain guns and mortars were brought out from the caves and were fired on Mokmer Drome and on the road. Before morning, they were returned to the caves. Which caves, the infantrymen did not know. Company L, 163rd Infantry, was occupying the observation post on Hill 320. This unit moved out of position early during the morning of the 20th of June. As soon as this change was discovered by the task force commander, the unit was immediately ordered to reoccupy this position. Fortunately, the Japanese in that vicinity did not realize that Hill 320 was unoccupied, and Company L was able to reoccupy the position without enemy interference. The enemy occupied positions throughout the area in the immediate vicinity of Hill 320 and intermittently placed mortar fire and mountain gun fire on the units of the 3rd Battalion, 163rd Infantry. Throughout the night, the 186th Infantry received mountain gun fire from Japanese positions. During the day of the 20th of June, this unit's effort to advance was slowed by heavy machine gun, rifle, and mortar fire. The regiment was forced to dig in at 1 o'clock in the afternoon due to increased enemy fire of all types. During the period, 84 Japanese were killed. 11 of our troops were killed and 47 wounded. The majority of our casualties were due to mortar fire. Our casualties might well have been much higher, except for advantageous use of unusually broken terrain. On June 21st, the 1st Battalion of the 162nd Infantry again sent troops to the Sumps, preceded by 2 patrols on the high ground on each side of the Sump area. The Japanese snipers, who had made so much trouble the day before, were wiped out. While under the cover of automatic and small arms fire, men with flamethrowers sprayed sniper positions. Occasionally, the sniper would run out screaming, but usually would be found still in his positions, charred and burning slowly. Freed from sniper trouble, and supported by 2 Sherman tanks, infantrymen reached points on the western lip of the Sump, from which they could fire and throw grenades into the entrances of some of the caves. As enemy soldiers would appear, they would be immediately riddled with bullets. But as the main cave entrances were shielded by stalagmites and stalactites, the Japanese positions were still strongly held. The cave at the western end of the Sump was attacked on this date. Tank fire was brought against the cave entrance, and flamethrowers were fired into the mouth of the cave. This particular cave was shaped like a well. To further eliminate the enemy, 5 large drums of gasoline were poured into the cave through crevices and seepage points that had been found on top of the cave. This gasoline was ignited. No personnel were sent into the cave at this time, as it was suspected that there were connecting tunnels leading to other installations, at that time not reduced. A series of explosions were heard the following day. It was believed that the gasoline inside was still burning and had reached ammunition stores. Attack was continued against a second cave position without success. At dark, the attacking units pulled back to the 1st Battalion area, and 4.2 mortars fired on enemy positions throughout the night. During the night, Japanese again attacked, and over 100 made an effort to reach Korim Bay. Information was obtained from a prisoner of war, who revealed that at 3 a.m. on the 22nd of June, Colonel Kuzume, commander of the 222nd Infantry, held a ceremony in the main sump cave. The colonel is reported to have stated that all able-bodied soldiers should attempt a withdrawal to the north in any way they might find possible. Documents were then destroyed and gasoline poured on the regimental colors. When the colors had been burned, the troops yelled the traditional banzai. The 3rd Battalion, 163rd Infantry, made an effort to contact the 186th Infantry without success. Due to dense jungle and incorrect map, the positions of this battalion were difficult to locate. The 186th Infantry sent out patrols in force throughout the day. During the day, 81 enemy dead were counted with the loss of 7 of our men KIA and 16 WIA. Throughout the night of the 22nd of June, Japanese mortar fire was placed in the 186th Infantry area. There were no casualties, however. The broken terrain offered almost complete protection against fire unless directly hit. The 34th Infantry greatly improved their positions on the 21st of June. After capturing the Boroko and Cerrito dromes in Cerrito village, the 34th Infantry had sent out units to secure the high ground north of the dromes. This was done as directed on the 20th of June. On the 21st of June, contacts were made between units occupying the high ground north of the dromes, and roadblocks were established on the Korim Trail and on the road leading northwest from the Sump Hole area. Company I repulsed 3 counterattacks on the Korim Trail during the night of the 21st of June. During the night of the 21st of June and early morning of the 22nd of June, the Japanese attempted a suicidal effort to break through the lines of the 186th Infantry. In the face of this night assault, the 186th Infantry demonstrated their ability to withstand a fierce night attack with a remarkable degree of courage and skill. 109 Japanese were killed. Only 1 man of the 186th was killed. This casualty occurred when a Japanese jumped in the soldier's foxhole and fired a grenade, killing them both. It is believed that this Japanese force was the main portion of the remainder of the Sump Hole garrison. Early morning on June 22nd found the areas around the lip of the Sumps littered with Japanese dead. As in preceding nights, the Japanese had pulled their heavy weapons into open positions from which to fire on the road and on Mokmerdrome. This time our early morning patrols were prepared for them. Many Japanese who had not withdrawn to participate in the suicidal attack through the 186th Infantry were caught in the open before they could get back into the caves. In one case, 6 Japanese took cover in a shell crater. They were seen, and a 60mm mortar fired its first registration shell into the crater with them. All were killed. Later in the morning, the infantry secured the lip of the sump under the cover of 50 caliber machine gun and 75mm gunfire from tanks. Several experiments had been tried in the reduction of the sump caves, but none so effective as the 850-pound charge of dynamite lowered by engineers into the cave entrance. The charge was lowered into the cave by a winch and fired electrically. This effectively reduced the cave. Only a few Japanese survived the explosion, most of whom came running out. At least one was insane. Systematically, the remaining caves were reduced by the combination of tank fire, explosives, and flamethrowers. The caves were reduced for practical purposes on this day. It was reported that troops entered the caves on the 25th of June. However, it was not until the 27th of June that the last Japanese had been killed within the Sump network. On that day, the inner recesses of the caves were entered and searched. Considerable equipment was found, including generators, field guns, mortars, and a high-powered radio. There were also large stores of food and ammunition. Living conditions must have been unbearable for the Japanese. The smell of the rotting bodies permeated the tunnels and inner chambers. By the end of the 23rd of June, nearly all enemy resistance in the high ground north of the dromes had ceased. Many Japanese were killed throughout the area, but no organized positions were contacted. The semi-organized positions opposing the 186th Infantry were hourly becoming more untenable for the Japanese. The task force commander was now able to turn his attention to organized Japanese positions in the ridges north of Mokmar and Ibdi towns. The 163rd Infantry, less 3rd Battalion, as has been previously mentioned, had the mission of patrolling the ridges between Parai and Warway. The enemy situation had developed as follows. On the 21st of June, Company I, 163rd Infantry, from their location on the high ground northwest of Ibdi, were attacking to the southwest. At a point 10 miles northwest of Ibdi, they set strong enemy resistance. This company had missed the enemy outpost positions, and when it opened fire, it received fire from 3 directions. Other elements of the 163rd Infantry were due north of this position on a high piece of ground and observed the fire. A heavy machine gun firing from that position evidently led the Japanese to believe that they were being attacked by a sizable force, and they opened up all along their position on the high ground to their north. The executive officer of the 163rd Infantry reported that the firepower encountered was that of a battalion. During this barrage of fire of all types, Company F withdrew to a point along the ridge which it could hold. 1 platoon remained in that location to prevent any move to the east, and the remainder of the company moved on back to Ibdi town. Throughout June 22nd and June 23rd, the Japanese positions along the ridge were harassed by heavy artillery and fire from the 163rd Infantry Cannon Company. On the 24th of June, the enemy position was skip-bombed by 12 B-25 Mitchells. Previous reconnaissance of the positions had been made in a Piper Cub. It was observed that the main enemy defensive position was apparently in a large cylindrical hole with caves leading off from its side. It was hoped that the B-25 Mitchells would be able to secure a direct hit in this hole. It was believed, but not positively determined, that the B-25 Mitchells did drop 1 bomb into the cave. On the 24th of June, the 163rd Infantry Regiment, still under task force control, participated in a coordinated attack with the 41st Division to seize the ridge extending from a point northwest of Ibdi to a point north of Mokmar village. The 3rd Battalion had been under control of the 41st Division, but was at this time released to the 163rd Infantry and placed in reserve, occupying a position on the trail north of Mandam. In order to facilitate the accomplishment of the regimental mission, it was decided to eliminate the enemy strong point northwest of Ibdi, which had been under artillery fire and air bombing. The scheme of maneuver was an enveloping movement. The 1st Battalion, attacking from the north and northwest, and Company F of the 2nd Battalion, attacking from the southwest, were to be the assault elements, while Company G occupied a position to the east where it could block and hold. By 6 p.m., the 25th of June, all units had closed in their assembly area. After heavy preparatory fire from supporting weapons, the attack was launched at 5:30 a.m. on the 26th of June. It is significant to note that this attack was launched before daylight, a move too infrequently attempted by our forces in jungle fighting. The result was highly satisfactory, as the attack was a complete surprise to the enemy. Many of his forward positions, normally occupied only during daylight, were found unmanned. This factor helped the attacking forces advance rapidly during the initial stages of the attack. They later contacted a series of enemy emplacements well organized in depth and protected by heavy sniper fire. The advance continued, but progress was slower. The close of the day's fighting found the regiment in position as shown on the accompanying map. 2 platoons of Company A at the time were heavily engaged in a firefight. It was then decided to move Company F west to a position adjoining the Company G area and assist that company in its mission to blocking and holding. Company F, by the end of the day, the 27th of June, had taken up its new position. During the day, the other elements of the attacking force made slight advances, which improved their positions so that they would be better prepared to continue the attack the following day. In the meantime, it was well known to the task force commander that the Mokmar Pocket, or East Cave, was still occupied by the Japanese. This position was located in the cliffs north of Mokmar town, and though seldom active, was always a potential threat to our traffic on the road to the airdromes. In fact, the road was forced to be closed on one occasion, when the Japanese placed mortar fire on the shoulders of the road. On the night of June 23rd, the task force motor pool was shelled. However, no damage was done. A company of infantry was given the mission of reducing this position, but by June 27th had met with only slight success. The Japanese were engaged in several firefights, but their results were always unobserved. On the 27th of June, Japanese again shelled the main road, forcing a halt to our vehicles. An airstrike was made on the Japanese position by 12 P-40 Warhawks. It was believed highly successful. The planes bombed and strafed for nearly an hour. At the completion of the strike, the Japanese positions were silent. After the I Corps had returned to Hollandia, the cliff positions were entered. The dominant factor of the Biak campaign was the high combat efficiency of the enemy. The enemy, principally the 222nd Infantry Regiment of the 36th Division, characterized Japanese military tradition at its best. By 6 p.m., the 28th of June, 2,801 enemy had been killed in action, and only 13 taken prisoner. Of the prisoners, all but one were from other than combat service elements, and therefore of limited tactical assistance. Further, the enemy at all times displayed a remarkable security consciousness from the point of view of documents and identifications carried on personnel. Literally hundreds of enemy dead were searched in vain for documents or other identification. Those documents that were found were principally from abandoned enemy headquarters, in which all enemy personnel had been killed before destruction of documents could be completed. Many enemy were killed inside of caves and on ridges or ledges, from which their bodies could not be recovered and searched. The enemy's commendable use of security measures made our intelligence work exceedingly difficult, but at the same time emphasized the importance of having intelligence personnel attached with forward battalions, so that no opportunity will be lost to search enemy dead during the heat of battle. Once darkness fell, the enemy lost little time in removing his dead and wounded. Much information, however, was gained from natives. The natives of the island had been hostile to the enemy from the outset of Japanese invasion, and upon learning of the arrival of our forces, they came in droves to be fed, cared for, and interrogated under the direction of the task force commander. Many natives volunteered to act as guides, and also to personally infiltrate deep into enemy-held territory in order to procure information. Because of the dearth of documents and prisoners, this activity was of limited but vital assistance. About 10 days after arrival at Biak, a radiogram was received from the commanding general's Alamo force, directing that plans be prepared to return headquarters to Hollandia as soon as the emergency had been cleared sufficiently to permit turning the command of the task force over to General Doe. The headquarters and headquarters company, and the headquarters and headquarters artillery battery, returned to Hollandia in 3 echelons, 2 groups returning by air transport, and the remainder by water. Command of the Hurricane Task Force was relinquished by General Eichelberger on the 27th of June, and General Doe assumed command. By this time, the situation at Biak was one in which complete enemy dispositions were known. The organized pockets were under constant attack, and mopping up activities were entering the final stages in clearing out the remnants of the 222nd Infantry.
For more epic content, subscribe to The Shadows in the Past.